This video is a video of appreciation that I would like to share with you. It's something related to a personal breakthrough and the realization that I recently had, which makes me very happy, and I would like to share it with you. And I would also like this video to be um, a testament for the kind of outcomes that you can expect if you sit with the journey of discovery, if you dare to continue mustering up the courage to face the frustration and the confusion and sometimes the loneliness of going through an important change in your life. So, I've been invested heavily in learning about myself during the past 5 years. And this was not planned. This was due to my need to cope with very dire life situations, especially related to the fact that my mother got ill in 2019, and she was diagnosed back then with a terminal illness. She was diagnosed in August 2019 with stage 4 colon cancer. And as you can imagine, being um, an only son, an only child, that hit me like a ton of bricks, to say the least. And it was heavily disruptive for me and my life at the time. In 2019, I didn't have children, but I was married. 1 year passed since my marriage, and I, let's say, didn't plan for this kind of disruption, right? But like most things in life, you never know when you have to confront what ultimately is the life experience that changes you forever. And that for sure was my case. This experience and the years that followed while caring about her and being with her and going with her through um, this very hard and confusing journey while seeking help and while being treated and so on. This journey was for me, in retrospect, now that I'm looking at it, 5 years, 6 years from that moment, and almost 1.5 years since she passed away in December 2023, I realized that that very experience created of me a different person altogether. And I'm deeply grateful ultimately for what I call an unconscious sacrifice that she made for her only son to be able to rediscover himself and enjoy life for what life has to offer. Because you see, in 2019, I was rather, let's say, ungrateful with everything that I had at that time. I was not very happy with myself, with my achievements, with how I felt about myself. I felt very weak, very insecure, very threatened about other people who might be more than me, who might know more than me. I was not at all very collaborative. Not that I'm very collaborative necessarily now, but I'm this is one of my missions at this point. But I was very rigid. I was very strict with myself as well. I was also not a very happy presence for most people, I would expect. I had people who deeply cared about me, but because I had this kind of internal state of unease and dissatisfaction with myself and how I was doing of myself in life, despite external success. I was working in Luxembourg since 4 years already at that point. Um, I was, yeah, technology consultant. um, I had a good financial situation. We even bought a house here in France, um, where I live since 2015. So there were a lot of good reasons why I should have been happier, right? And now when I think about it, I'm even um, sad for my my 2019 self, right? Because I remember his struggle, and I also remember how impossible that mission was, you know. So that I'm talking also about how I was before this event with my mother. So I was on this in this state of dissatisfaction overall. I was not necessarily very excited about, you know, the next day and the next week, and I felt at that point that there is some sort of a next level that I don't know how to tap into, and it felt that it consumed me. It felt that I need some way to reach it. And I had to go through this intense 5 years period of my life, um, with my mother, and seeing her battling cancer and helping her throughout the journey, and and everything that happened in that period to help me actually rediscover myself, and eventually put everything into perspective for me, so that I now can look towards the future, with much more confidence and much happier with the perspectives that I have. Um, and not only with the perspectives that I have, but with already the state of mind that I currently possess, and with my ability to embody today the kind of attitude that I would not have been able to carry with me 5 years ago, right? So um, this brings me to the breakthrough that I had recently, um, and the breakthrough came in the context of me wanting to discover that one field in which I want to start developing mastery. I'm very passionate about learning, and my learning up to this point was not necessarily scattered, but was rather broad, right? So initially, I started to improve my own health, which then intrigued me a lot about the kind of new levels of energy that I was discovering by simply losing some weight. And then I started to learn about metabolism, and then how is that linked to my state of mind. And then I started to be intrigued by neuroscience, and I discovered Andrew Huberman's podcast, the Huberman Lab podcast. And then I went into all sorts of deep rabbit holes related to metabolism, with metabolic diseases, with intermittent fasting, how we can rejuvenate the cells, how we can extend health span. And then I discovered Peter Attia's podcast, The Drive, and I was deeply fascinated about it. So I have this kind of predisposition of going in deep into topics that I find fascinating at the time. So I learned a lot about myself. Initially, purely because I discovered in me the kind of capabilities in terms of fitness and energy and engagement with the world that intrigued me a lot. And then I realized that improving my own health also impacted the way I look at the world. And then I became intrigued about this kind of experience, the kind of subjective experience that we have as human beings on this earth. And I started to become intrigued with sciences of the mind, right? I started to read psychology, cognitive psychology, behavioral psychology, how it links to our own evolution, right? Evolutionary psychology, anthropology, why did we evolve like we evolved, and then how the brain evolved throughout the millions of years, and how the species had to um, accommodate different kind of environments as the time passed, and so on. and and then I discovered also like this kind of metaphysics field of the study of the world in a way that can impact how we interact with it, right? The nature of reality, and what does it mean in terms of subjective experience. um, so I was deeply fascinated about this field, because it was something completely new, and I also see the positive impact that integrating all this knowledge had in my own life, right? From what I call myself a pragmatic pessimist like 6 years ago, and I was wearing it as a badge of honor. I was very proud with the fact that I was always able to find the problems and spend time with problems and look at them and then justify that things cannot be really accomplished because look, there are all these problems here. And when I realized that this is actually something very intuitive for human beings, and we evolved in conditions of survival and scarcity and defending from threats and finding problems and being defensive and being negative about stuff and worrying about stuff is the very natural thing to do as a human being, right? Because it's the safest approach to life. There are very few people who are very optimist and they're just going and positive thinking and so on. And for me, this was like bullshit. Like, why are you so optimistic? There are so many negative things in life. How can you be so happy? And I truly believe that. Not knowing, of course, that this very pessimistic attitude towards life was what kept me away from reaching whatever destination I wanted to reach, just for the sake of proving myself that I was right. And of course, because I was right in a way, because I was looking explicitly for those things which would invalidate, let's say, a positive outcome, I was finding them. But now, this feels so stupid to me. I cannot put it in different terms. Um, Now, I would not trade an ideal outcome, a positive outcome, a goal that I want to accomplish, and the possibility of accomplishing it just for the sake of being right now. I prefer to be right later when I will actually achieve the goal and convince myself that there are millions of paths towards that outcome than get some sort of momentary reward by proving to myself that indeed I cannot do whatever thing, right? Because I have proof. Look, I have this obstacle. There's nothing I can do about it. And it all changed for me when I simply decided that I now have this kind of moral obligation to discover my own potential as a sacred mission and an homage, if you want, for the memory of my mother. Because if I choose to see her passing as an unconscious sacrifice that she made for me to discover my own greatness and live the best life that I can live, then it's my moral responsibility to act on this promise and actually do whatever it takes for me to become the best version of myself, not for my own sake, not from egotistical reasons, but in order to serve the people around me in the best way possible and show them the kind of example that I would like them to take from the world when meeting a human being. And this is the case with my kids, with my family, with my group of friends, and also with the society at large. I think that's ultimately a moral responsibility for all human beings. If we would really be able to look at what really matters in this life, I think we can, all of us, model for ourselves the kind of people we want to see more of in the world. And if we would do that, each one of us, I think this world would not need a lot of political debates and all sorts of ambiguous strategies at very high levels. Everyone would act on their own values against the kind of life they would like to see more of around them. Now, back to my breakthrough, right? Because I didn't yet tell you about this. So I recently, well, not really recently, but about 1 year ago, 1.5 years ago rather, even before the passing of my mother, um, I was starting to ask myself, okay, I learned so much about myself. I learned so much not only about myself, but about the human mind and about the human behavior and about this incredible way of changing your own experience if you choose to look differently at the thing, because that thing is not objective in itself. It's a subjective storage, right? If something happens in life, the memory that you have about that thing, it's not objective as such. It's stored in your memory in a way that makes sense to you, according to your own values, according to your own upbringing, according to your own beliefs, according to um, the state of mind you were in that day. So when I realized that, I then started to look back in my past and see those kind of events, which I then choose retrospectively to make them healthy and useful to me. Um, and I wanted simply to help others with all this knowledge that I've built from investigating the human nature and the human behavior, and learning everything about myself. And I had a difficult time finding what that was, right? What should I do? Should I teach people how to do intermittent fasting and help them lose some weight because I did that and I know how to do that? Should I help people who can't run 1 kilometer, make a training program for them so they can run a semi-marathon because I did that and I did it, at least 10 times in the last 6 years? Should I focus on nutrition? Should I focus on parenting? Because I learned so many things about being a parent and learning from being a parent in the past 5.5 years since I have my son and my daughter, but she's like 2.5 almost. So I learned a lot. So should I talk about that, or should I talk maybe about, I don't know, spirituality and metaphysics and Buddhist philosophy or Greek philosophy, because I also like the Greeks, right? Should I talk about mindfulness? Should I create mindfulness practices for people? Or should I just talk about self-development? And I was like, okay, but how can I wrap this? How can I package all this, right? In a way that then allows me to also grow and have my own unique stake on it, and explain things in a way that will evolve inevitably with my own evolution from this point on. And then I discovered this concept of coaching. And I knew of coaching, of the concept from sports. Um, and initially, I didn't know exactly how that works. Um, and then I learned about it. And I discovered this field of coaching, life coaching or transformational coaching, which I was immediately drawn into because of the potential and because I already lived my own transformation, and I resonated a lot with a lot of concepts behind transformational coaching. Um, and I then realized that my very experience and this complementary understanding of everything that leads to a personal transformation was ultimately an unfair advantage for most coaches who just discover the field as a concept and study coaching purely from a theoretical point of view. They obtain a certification and then they just try to change other people's lives without necessarily having had to go themselves through some, important transformation in their own life. And that's something no training can buy, right? Right. And I learned that, and I was so grateful for having had this experience, because I realized how important it is to have stories, real stories that you can share with people when accompanying them on their own journey, and create this kind of safe space of compassion and awareness, knowing the kind of challenges they are being confronted with. Because if you were not challenged yourself in your life, you cannot expect to resonate or understand someone who is challenged now. You cannot establish that kind of rapport. You cannot have this kind of compassionate understanding about their situation. So it's very difficult to actually trigger or facilitate a transformation in that person. So I was very happy to understand this. And then I became very curious why. I mean, okay, so I resonate with this. I know that transformational coaching is something that I would like to pursue. Um, I resonate a lot with the tools and the exercises that are done in the kind of the transformational coaching program that I followed from a coach called Sean Smith, and I followed his neurotransformational, yeah, I think it was neurotransformational coaching, breakthrough coaching certification, and I resonated a lot with the material and the exercises, right? And he was talking about the things that I just mentioned about, right? The fact that the human experience is always subjective, that we don't see reality as it is, we see it as we are, that we interpret everything that happens on outside according to our internal representational systems, and we filter information according to the way that we frame reality for ourselves, again primed by our beliefs, how we relate to each other, the education that we receive, the culture, and everything. And it felt very natural and intuitive for me. And mostly that was because I myself had to come up with similar mechanisms by myself, alone, simply to cope with the reality when I was going through hardship. I had to frame things in a way that give me power so I can continue be a functional member of the family, be a functional husband, then be a functional and supportive parent for my children. So out of pure necessity, I was exploring the nature of reality, which then proved to be deeply, deeply helpful in the field of transformational coaching. And I was very happy with it. So 1 year passed from that point on, and I just recently had this breakthrough, right? I was like, okay, so transformational coaching is nice, but I also like talent development in general. I like to mentor people because I have a unique, I would say, take on um, how I can bring my engineering background into this coaching and mentorship context, and how I can support analytical minds with rather soft concepts related to their own beliefs, their own struggles, how they can evolve as leaders in the engineering space. Um, and I use what I learned about myself, about the subjective experience, about beliefs, and use that in the context um, of of highly analytical minds, because this is how it helped me. This is how I had to grasp it, and I found this field called NLP, right? Neuro linguistic programming, and I realized that NLP was also at the core of transformational coaching and was fundamental to the initial mastery, getting mastery of my initial coach, Sean Smith, and it was fundamental to the breakthrough coaching certification that he had, and this concept of neurotransformational coaching. And NLP is effectively the kind of field at the intersection of all my interests and my expertise, and it is the vehicle that ultimately leads to transformation in a way that is predictable. Um, so I came to this field just recently in a way that I was not able to come to like 1 year ago when I first heard the term. I just now realized this is exactly what I need, and this is exactly fitting my own mindset, my own expertise, and how I would like to, or what I would like to leverage from now on in terms of support in my coaching. So NLP is for me the art and science, if you want, of human experience and human potential. Why art and science? Because neurolinguistic programming, if you take each term, neural, it's related to the nervous system of the human body, right? Every kind of long-lasting transformation ultimately has to happen at the level of the nervous system. If it's not happening at the level of the nervous system, it's just a temporary change. It will more or less revert to previous behaviors and previous patterns in terms of neural activity. Linguistic, because you use the language. So the whole field of NLP is about using words and language in a certain way so that we can reprogram in a very concrete way the perspective, the subjective experience of a human being. And why with language? Because if you think about it, the very experience of life that you have, you created in your own mind using words and using language. And you have this kind of inner dialogue and inner stories, even if they are not developed or maintained consciously. You use words and language in your mind in order to create your subjective experience, especially to attach meaning to things that happen to you, right? Because, like I said, human experience is perfectly subjective, right? There is no way for you or for me or for anyone to tap into the objectivity of whatever you see around you. You have the senses, you have your visual system, your auditory system, your different senses, right? Feel, right? Kinesthetic, smell, touch. But these are senses which evolved in the context of our own evolution. So we are able to survive in this kind of unknown environment ultimately, right? And come to grasp with it enough that we survive and we accommodate the constraints of it, right? And the senses are not evolved so that they give us complete understanding about everything that's happening there, because it was not useful or relevant or needed really for us to simply evolve. So evolution selected for those traits which maximize the chances of us getting our genes into the next generation. It did not select for the traits that help us see the reality in an objective way, or for that matter, it did not select for the traits which maximized our happiness as an individual. It's not really relevant at all, right? So what's relevant is that we live long enough to procreate, and then this cycle perpetuates and the species evolve. Now, why I say it's the art and science? Because the science part is related to the nervous system, to the neuroscience, to the field of knowledge which allows us to understand how human behavior evolves and can be changed purely from a nervous system point of view. The art is because if we use language, there is nothing that concrete about language, right? Language is simply a descriptive mechanism of ultimately agreed upon objects that we all use. And language allows us to discuss with each other and have more or less the same understanding on stuff. But of course, that's a double-edged sword. And you all know that because it happened a lot in your life that you discussed about a certain thing only to find out 5 minutes later that you discussed about completely different things, right? And there are even some comedy sketches on this, like people discussing about stuff and they agreeing upon it, and then ultimately they understood something completely different. This can happen from all sorts of reasons, either because the context for each of them was different and they use words in a way that meant, right, the meaning part, in a way that meant something different for each of them, or simply that the word itself is interpreted differently by the other, but also in a different, basically because of a different conceptual understanding of the word. So that's why it's an art, because we need to understand, first of all, how is a person using a certain word, how is a certain person using words and language to limit or empower their own experience, right? If you tell about yourself things which are limiting you, I cannot do this because I'm not good enough, for example, which is a very common limiting belief, then that's the story that you tell to yourself, and reinforced enough times, that becomes your truth, which is of course subjective. And it's also not really, really true, but it's your own truth that you reinforced throughout time unconsciously through a selective accumulation of proof that just proves to you that you are not good enough in ways that you can then integrate very easily. And then you get to live life according to this kind of self-imposed limitation, which has nothing to do with objective reality. But this is how you live it. This is how you experience reality, because you believe this is true, and everything that you do in life is then framed through this kind of limitation that for you is as real as the truth itself, right? But if you start to bring it into conscious awareness and start to carve, break it down and see that ultimately this statement cannot self-sustain itself. There is nothing real there. You don't have really like objective proof to confirm it. Then you realize that basically it was just a lie. And when you see that it was just a lie that you kept telling to yourself, it will just collapse, and basically everything will be much better, because you will give yourself at least the chance to prove yourself that you can do stuff that you otherwise thought you cannot do. Therefore, you thought that you are not good enough, and so on. So NLP is about this kind of understanding your human experience and finding ways in which you can alter what's called the map of reality, right? Um, in a way that is empowering to you, and develop the kind of subjective beliefs that are empowering you. And they don't have to be incorrect, they are not false. You're just not looking in the right way, so that you take them now for granted and you develop empowering beliefs in terms of limiting beliefs. And this kind of integration of the conscious mind with the unconscious mind, and bringing what's in the unconscious to the level of awareness of your conscious mind, and how the conscious and the unconscious interplay with subjective reality, and with spirituality, and with non-duality, and how we can literally create, in a way, our own subjective experience of life. This is very fascinating for me. And I found NLP at the middle of all these fields of knowledge about the human mind, in as a field of expertise in which I can develop mastery, and this is my pursuit now. And I will develop mastery in NLP because I know that I can then continue to be fascinated about how the human mind works, but in a way that is now more channeled, in a way that is not purely according to my own empiric understanding of the world, but in the context of a field which has huge potential for transforming people's mind. And this is for me, yeah, this is very, very exciting, um, because I now can focus exclusively on NLP, knowing that is not limiting me at all, knowing that it allows me to engage in the kind of life experiments that I would anyway do, but now I have concrete tools, I have concrete exercises that I can test on myself, and that I can also improve other people's lives with them. And this is deeply, deeply, deeply rewarding. So, yeah, I just wanted to share this. Thank you if you stayed up to this point with me. And again, this is mostly to just give you the courage to not give up on chasing what you value most in life, and own the journey all the time, especially when it becomes challenging and frustrating, because you know that there is something there. And the challenge and the frustration is really a natural part of any learning journey. And you don't want ever to stop, because if everything would be easy and you would never have to work for anything, life would become very boring very fast, and you would not be happier. I can promise you that. Okay, I can promise you. You would maybe spend 1 week in Bali on the beach drinking cocktails, but then at some point you would realize that you still have maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years to go, and you cannot just sit on a beach drinking cocktails for 50 more years, right? And it's not about the money, it's not about anything else. It's about your own need to feel good about yourself, and about doing things that fulfill you on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, I'm here to just give you confidence and tell you that the journey is worth it, and you should never give up on looking for what's that thing, what's that unique thing that you can start becoming slightly obsessed about, which allows you to develop and grow in ways that are deeply meaningful to you. So never give up on that, and stay on the path. I'll be cheering for you, yeah, from the sidelines.